good to see you all. And I'm so glad you're joining us this evening for our book discussion on Beauty for Truth's Sake that we've all been reading. And if we're like Presbytera, we've been speed reading a second time this very day. I don't have those skills, but she literally read through the whole thing again today. If you haven't read it all, don't worry. You're still invited and welcome. We call this a book discussion, but I think it may be more accurate to call it an idea discussion, an idea exchange. So I'm so glad that you're with us this evening. And I want to just give you a little layout of how it will go, because we want to be sure that you have an opportunity to exchange your ideas and your thoughts as we talk. So what we're going to do is I'm going to provide an intro. And for those of you whom I think that I've met most of you, but if not, I'm Joylyn Blake. I'm the director of Scholé Academy. If we haven't met, good to see you. And I'm joined by Allison Haley, who is our technology and academic specialist, and you probably got all your Canvas training from her. And our principal of St. Raphael's School, Presbytera Maria Culianos, and she's going to, the three of us are going to kind of moderate some breakout rooms, but we're going to start with a little intro from me, and then we will break into breakout rooms that you, our friends and participants, will get to select. You'll get to select which breakout room you want to enter based on the topic of discussion in that breakout room. And then we'll come back together at the end to kind of share highlights and so forth. Okay, so that is sort of the lowdown of the evening as a whole. Now, about my introduction, I thought I would tell you a little bit about how that's going to go. I'm going to introduce the ideas that will be discussed in the three breakout rooms, and I'm going to introduce them with some images and some ideas. And so as I do that, I hope that it will evoke in you some remembrances of maybe something that you read, a quote that was meaningful that you marked in the margins or that you wrote side notes for, or maybe it will evoke in you a particular point of amazement or a wow. I don't know if you were like me, but there were times in the margin that I was just saying, wow, that's all I could say. And then other things that I blocked out. So maybe it will bring to your remembrance one of those moments. Or if you're like me, you may have put some question marks in the margin, or I wonder about this, or something that you further wanted to ponder. So in light of that, those are the things that I want you to think about. If you have your copy of your book or whatever you took notes with, be thinking through that, because when we go into the breakout rooms, that is what you'll be invited to think through and share through, or some of those quotes, or some of those big ideas and ahas, or some of those questions that you were still pondering. Okay. And like I said, at the end, we're going to come back together to see what we can draw as points of maybe application at the end, because we don't want to leave the knowledge just at a two-dimensional area. We want to expand it to three-dimensional application in our lives, right? Okay. So let us begin by my sharing with you what the first room and the first topic of discussion will be, okay? Let me move us over a little bit. So, all right, so before I show you the first image, let me ask you a question. If I say Michelangelo, what comes to mind? Actually, I'm going to stop the share for a minute, just so Michelangelo, please fix an image in your mind. Maybe some of you are automatically picturing the David, right? David is really famous. Or maybe you're picturing the Sistine Chapel, something like that, right? So the first image that I'm going to share is from a book called Michelangelo by Diane Stanley. For those of you who want to take notes, it's a children's picture book. I'm going to share with you an image of Michelangelo. All right, take it in, folks. I'm guessing it may not have been the image that came to your mind, but I'll read a little excerpt from this book where this illustration is captured. Okay, it says, to understand his subject better, Michelangelo went to the hospital of Santo Spirito and got permission to study anatomy in the morgue. He spent hours there dissecting bodies, memorizing the origins and insertions of the muscles, the positions of tendons and veins. It was a gruesome exercise, taking apart the dead to discover their secrets. The first topic that will be discussed in breakout room 1 is what I call faith and reason, or it could be broken down like this. It could be called, there we go. The cosmos versus the universe. Do you remember reading about that in the book? There's a differentiation between the cosmos that is infused with the wonder, the majesty, and the creative divine order of things. That's the understanding of a cosmos, a picture that understands reality from a faith-filled frame of reference, versus universe. Devoid of God, devoid of faith, mechanistic understanding. Or some of you may have, seen the breakdown of religion versus science. But this room will dive into, if you wanted philosophic titles for it, it would be ideas in metaphysics and ideas in epistemology. How do we as humans know a topic best? And I think you remember that in the book, it was kind of diving into, it was combating the modernistic ideal of, something by picking it apart, pulling it apart, dissecting it, and almost treating it as a dead thing, versus appreciating something as a living, beautiful thing. Now, just so Michelangelo doesn't get a bad rap, I will say that at the first and the end of that paragraph, the starting part of it said that Michelangelo did not find the naked body in the least embarrassing, for he had been taught that man was created in the image of God. It was the human form, in fact, that most interested Michelangelo as an artist. And then at the end, the last sentence, it says, it was there in the morgue that he gained his astonishing power to bring forth life from a block of stone. So I don't want to give the impression that it is pointless or wrong to dissect, to look at things anatomically, and to try to get into the mechanics and the details of something. But if that is our starting place without starting at God, I don't think the life is ever discovered or infused again. So we're going to be talking in this breakout room about that kind of divorce of faith and reason, and the necessity for those two really to go together, as was brought out in the book. Okay? All right, room number 2. The next image I wanted to show you, I don't know if any of you know who this lovely person is, but I didn't either. I knew who this person was in concept, but not actually meeting or hearing from this person until this past week when I was at the Circe conference in Denver, Colorado. This lovely woman is Christine Perrin, wife of Chris Perrin. And you may or may not have heard that Christine is currently going through treatment for cancer. And she gave a profound and moving and beautiful talk on virtue by exploring the Beatitudes and the Beatitudes through some novels. But in this talk, she gave this really amazing claim that in her current state of being, she is able to call it blessed. And it's not because it's fun or in the human form, something that any of us would want to experience. But she said, according to God's articulation of what blessedness entails through the Beatitudes, the Lord has said, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. And so there was a comment made by someone else at the conference saying they've never seen someone more beautiful. And the reason that I bring this out tonight is that beauty can come in unexpected ways and in unexpected places. And in the book in particular, I was surprised by unexpected forms of beauty. So this room is going to be talking about beauty and truth and the relationship of those together. And it's going to entertain some of these unexpectedly beautiful things like numbers and shape and order in the universe that typically doesn't fall into the natural category of, oh, that's beautiful, but it certainly did. It was brought out by this author in this book. And there's a line in the book that says, you know, there's one thing to know the truth of things versus a truth about things. And the author makes this claim that beauty helps us know the truth of things. So this will be sort of an exploration of, again, some metaphysics and some aesthetics, our aesthetic senses, and how that can lead us to truth. And it will be moderated by Allison Haley. Again, the breakout rooms, don't expect any of us to launch into any kind of lecture or anything. It's just an opportunity for us to speak, and the moderators will just be inviting you to reflect along with them. And then finally, do you recognize this photo? This is a popular one. John Mays is making it into a number of our communications recently. So John Mays is our author of our Navarre science textbooks. And here is yet another young teenage girl who finds him at conferences when he shows up and says, can you sign my science textbook for me? Because he's like a walking celebrity for these people who find his textbooks beautiful and his words and the way he leads them into discovery as beautiful. But the thing that I wanted to bring out about the John in this moment was at this conference. This happened to be at the Great Homeschooling Convention of Texas. And during one of our little breaks, I went up to John and I was saying, John, help me out. My daughter I have 4 children, but the youngest one is the complete artist of the family. Like if she could do art 24/7, that's what she'd be doing. Art is her jam. And I'm like, but you need to study some science. You will be taking physics this year. So I said, John, help me, give me something that I can tell her. How will physics help her in her art? Tell me how the study of physics is going to help her in her art. And this is what John said. He stroked his long beard and he said, I'd like to maybe turn the question around. I'd like you to consider, how will art help her with physics? How will art lead her to physics? And I was like, what do you mean? And so he proceeded to say, well, for example, if somebody's going to study light, we go about this all wrong. We start by, throwing the spectrum of light and the rainbows of colors, and let's repeat the spectrum and the prisms and the da-da-da. And he said, and already eyes are glazing over and people are bored, but he said, but instead, this is how I introduce light. And he said, first, I start with this choral piece about the majesty of light. And then I show this image on the screen of a beach scene and the sun rising, and this beautiful girl looking at the sun and the light. He said, the truth is, light, to every scientist, engineer, physicist who really knows anything, it's still a mystery. It's still bewildering. And that the best science can do is not say laws or explain something away. The best science can do is model. This is our best explanation thus far of what this thing is and what's going on. And then you start to show the spectrums and the arrays of light and everything. And I found it riveting. Just his explanation, standing there in the corner of our booth, I found this riveting. So this room is going to talk about education and enchantment. The ideas of how art illuminates us and actually brings illumination to us, right? And that it's not just the static dissection of a topic, but art itself can lead us into greater truth and help us with the enchantment of our imagination and our understanding. And I think you may remember in the book, he really, especially toward the end, talks about how liturgy is a great vehicle to help us walk through what it is to be a whole person, understanding and knowing, a whole knower. So it's going to be, cosmology, the nature of the cosmos in general, and then how our pedagogy should be in alignment with that to re-enchant ourselves and our students. And that's going to be moderated by the lovely Presbytera. So again, as a reminder, friends, the 3 rooms for selection are Faith and Reason, room 1, Beauty and Truth, room 2, or Education and Enchantment, room 3. And I do know it's going to be a hard decision. But you'll be able to pick one, and when you are in the room, the moderators are going to ask you first, as I already reviewed, like what? Like if we're going to say, what is this topic about? What did you notice? You can bring up a quote, you can talk about something that amazed you, or you can ask a question. This is all the what that we're putting in the box to, talk through and think through. Just bring that up. And then ideally, the conversation will lead into the, well, so what? If these are the facts and the truth, so what? Where does this lead us? And hopefully we will be led to actually apply the truth. I will stop the screen share now, and I'll give you a minute. Hopefully you've thought through which breakout room you'd like to join for a deeper dive. Each one will be recording. Room 1 will actually stay. Oh, I'm going to throw y'all off. I was going to say room 1 is staying in here, but that means when I open the breakout rooms, room 2 will actually appear as room 1. Am I right? And then room 3 will appear as room 2. Okay, so room 1 staying in here with me, Faith and Reason, just stay here. Room 2, you go with Alice and Haley to discuss beauty and truth. And the next breakout room, which will be labeled breakout room 2, will be with Presbytera, and you'll discuss education and enchantment. Okay. Any questions before I open these breakout rooms? All right. I'm going to let you choose the room. We should have 2 here. One, if you want to stay with me, stay in here. Otherwise, choose 1 for Allison's room, choose 2 for Presbytera's room. Okay.
don't see any choices. Does anyone else?
Oh, wait,
Some people do.
there we go. Some people are choosing. You can tell me, I think I may be able to assign you to a room. So tell me if you're not seeing a choice, tell me what room you want to choose and I can assign you.
I'll take it as providential because I was still trying to decide between this one and one of the others. I'll just.
You can just stay.
I think if you open breakout rooms, it will let you click on join.
Oh, thank
one of them.
you.
It's
You're
a little
right.
not intuitive. I was having trouble
I
at
see.
first too.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Okay, great. Well, let's visit and then I forgot to tell people the time, but we'll kind of visit for 25, 30 minutes and then we'll come back together. So, all right. Okay. Hopefully I can close this little window that's up here. Okay, hopefully I didn't want to shut people out of the rooms. Okay. Well, hi friends. Good to see you all. So the first thing is the what, and I'm just throwing it out there for everybody. For starters, why did you pick this topic? Why did you find this one intriguing? Other than Kat, who's like, well, by default, I got stuck in here. Why was this one intriguing to you?
I think the idea of metaphysics has been so lost just in general in any kind of academia or schooling or society as a whole. I thought that part of it was interesting and wanted to say in for that part of the discussion and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Andrew, remind me what it is that you're teaching or will be.
I do tutoring with SCOA Academy with Latin, some Latin classes now. It's only this is my third. I'm teaching some in the summer here. This is my third quarter.
Okay, great. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I remember, and this was years ago, like how long ago? 25 years ago, in my undergrad study in philosophy, like metaphysics was almost a bad word even then. Even then it was almost, and thankfully I was studying in a Christian context, but still the idea that the word that was very disparaged at that time was a meta narrative, that nobody wanted a meta narrative that claimed to explain everything as it is, because what a meta narrative does is this was the claim, it inherently oppresses, because it inherently brings an explanation that some people may not like or may not agree with, or feel like it doesn't articulate the reality in which I live, or it's not my truth, that kind of mentality. And so there is no such thing as an appropriate meta narrative or a metaphysic that explains everything as it is, and nobody has a right to lay claim to that. Is that some of what you had heard before?
Oh yes, definitely. I went to Georgia State University, and that same kind of thought as very well articulated on a lot of what I heard there, in terms of the kind of postmodern mindset of disparaging all meta narratives. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. Okay, someone else. Why were you intrigued by this topic?
I think this is the topic that's actually hardest for me. That's why I stayed. I have like a lot of like really eloquent thoughts about the other two topics, and I think this one challenges me the most. I think I'm very reactionary, like we don't have to talk about faith versus reason. There's good things about both of them. I mean, I'm sort of exaggerating. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But that's kind of why I stayed, because if anyone, most of you don't know me very well, but I tend to go find the thing that's hardest in life and then struggle through it. So I'm going to confess that this is the place where I have the least to say, so I'm interested to listen.
I admire that so much. I really do admire that so much. What a picture of a lifelong learner, in the fact all of us have to willingly choose to be humble before things that we have to learn. That's inherently the posture of a learner, or should be, is a state of humility, but typically we really like to, mask that. So I love the example that you're setting and the permission you're giving all of us to be a little ignorant, because we all are.
Yeah,
Anybody?
I also hope other people have things to say, because like Erin, I also was like, well, that's the one I feel like I have the least to contribute or the fewer thoughts about, but I feel like it's so relevant. I hear these conversations, had a conversation with my son this week about like religion and science. And so I'm hoping to learn from other people. So I don't know that I have tons to contribute, but I also just want to hear.
Yeah.
And learn.
Yeah, that's so great.
I
Okay.
also think it's a very relevant topic, especially, and for us as believers, it's not so difficult for us to understand that dance between faith and reason. But I think for society, there's such a focus, after the Enlightenment, we've had such a focus on the science and the reason. And I love reason. I'm naturally attracted to it, but I do appreciate faith and I can incorporate that into my life. But I think a lot of people in society and young people coming up don't really understand the value of faith as much as they do reason. That's my impression, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really aware of that, honestly, with my own kids as they get older, that there is a narrative kind of in our popular culture that celebrates reason over faith, and in a way that I really do think stands like in opposition to even the way they've been raised in my home. And so I'm very surprised as they enter adulthood and they come at me with, and I don't even know, Kat, like what your conversation was, but some of my older kids will come at me with like, statements about ways that, well, I'll make it simplistic, that reason and faith are incompatible. They're more complicated in their, statements. And, I'm often coming back at them like, that was never, I don't think that's really ever the way these things have been presented to you. And I want you to step back and think about, if you're like thinking through some statement out there that you've heard that doesn't even relate to who I even know you to be, who I know what I've known you to love and cherish for many, many years about, books that you like, ideas that you like. I mean, we're all affected by the story, what we hear around us. And so I guess mostly I'm agreeing that it's a relevant topic, because I think it's relevant even outside of faith circles, and that there is a tendency to disparage faith at the expense of faith, right? To disparage faith in general.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, funny enough, the reason that this is a passionate topic for me is it is kind of how I came back to faith, because I in my youngest years, or in my teen years, like so many of us, I was riddled by my own emotion, tossed here and there, to and fro, by being driven by emotional reactions to things. And then you do that long enough and you get hurt bad enough that what I retreated to is, I was like, wow, the source of my grief and my angst has been being guided by my emotion. So I retreated to my reason. And it was like, if that has been the source of my pain, then the source of my salvation will be this dispassionate analysis and analytical thinking that will lead me into all truth, But the more that I traveled down this path, the more I became kind of disillusioned. And it was sort of a breakthrough that I had with reading a couple of things. One was, no surprise, C.S. Lewis, but he was writing in a book called A Severe Mercy, and he was writing to correspondence with someone, and he made this comment about being a great brain on a tower would be no fun either, because you like no joy in the blue sky, no person to love, so it opened my mind up to like whole dimensions of the human loves and personhood that reason can't really touch. And I was like, well, that's really not a good meta narrative or a good explanation for all that is, because as a human, I have these longings that are apart from reason. And then this is where, to me, this is the death blow to the idea that reason is better than faith, or reason trumps faith, or that. And it's this. And I think it was mentioned even at the end of the book, that even if we found science to explain all natural phenomenon, and of course we haven't even scratched the surface, there's like so many more mysteries that we have no idea what that's for, what it's doing, right? But even if we got to the point that science explained every single one of them, science still would not tell us why. It tells us what, but it cannot tell us why. There's no scientific discovery that uncovers why all of this, why the orbits, why the design, why the order, why the plan, why do we exist at all? There's nothing that science has the power to answer the why. So to me, and here was the philosophic and the existential matter, that humans, we have to know the why, the reason. What is the reason for this? We're driven to know why, even if we don't have the full answer. Just the fact that we ask the question tells us something about ourselves, right? That's another C.S. Lewis quote. Do fish complain of the sea for being wet? If you're living in an environment that you were made to belong in, you don't even notice it. But somehow us humans, we feel like, I want to know, I want to understand, I want an explanation. So that indicates to me that we were made for something more than just the what. We were made for the why. We were made to understand. So I'm like, everything actually does fall back on faith, but people like idolize the human reason for things that it actually cannot do. Okay, I'm talking too much, y'all. I'm sorry. Back to you all. What quote or aha or anything did you want to bring out from the book that, like, oh, I loved this part, or I didn't understand this part at all?
I think what I found so beautiful is the beginning. Trying to see is the second chapter, where it talks a little bit about the history of classical education and how all of that, science and religion, was always one. It's only us moderns who separated it, who forgot about theology, and how there doesn't need to be any such struggle because it's one. And you were talking about the science teacher who teaches the beauty in that and approaches science from that angle. I was trying to find a quote, but I haven't gotten to it. I will tell you when I find it.
Okay.
That best summarizes what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
So I had a favorite quote, and it's at the end of the book, under the section 2 wings, which is really the best, I think, discussion on faith and reason. But it talks about how the medievals distinguished between the intellect as ratio, if I'm saying that right, and you can tell me, the Latin teacher, and intellectus, right? So ratio is the power of discursive thought, searching and researching and abstracting and refining and concluding, whereas intellectus refers to the ability of simply looking, to which the truth presents itself as a landscape presents itself to the eye. Maybe the idea of contemplation. And I think we've just really lost that whole idea of contemplation and intellectus. I mean, in our community, we probably do that more, but I mean, you go to any standard public school, I don't think that's going to be a conversation.
Yeah. Oh my word, I love that. Thank you for bringing that up about where the truth presents itself. That really, to me, provokes the idea of, when Jesus said, I am the truth, that it's a personal thing of presenting itself. But most of the time, like, we're looking to, find the truth, discover the truth, state the truth. but sometimes the truth presents itself and you apprehend it by looking, by contemplating. It's beautiful.
Something I keep thinking as I hear the things different people are commenting on is just that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so as we talk about what we're able to explain through reason, that is something, that is truth. But then putting that all together yields a whole that is bigger than what it looks like it should be. And so I was already thinking that with some of what several of you said. And then I was flipping through and I actually underlined a part where he talked about it being more than the sum of its parts. It says, this is where he's talking about the cosmos. And he says, it reveals the interdependence of all living things in a world that is more than a mechanism, more than the sum of its parts, perhaps even in some sense alive in its own right. Which I also, just speaking of being alive, just a couple of pages before that, he talked about the church being more than just a building that has been maintained by tradition, but being alive because of what happens inside it, the people that are connected with it. And that's also the whole being greater than just the sum of its parts. Yeah.
It's a beautiful observation. Yeah.
That comment about that section at the end about the two wings and about I think he refers to it as the intellectus or the nous, and that there's been a lot of writing from contemporary Orthodox elders in the 20th century about the nous, especially, well, it's a very old concept, obviously, but there's been some modern writing about it. And I always find that word challenging because it's like, gets translated mind, it gets translated intellect, but I've also seen it described as like the eye of the soul, right? So it's related to our soul. It's not just like this. This has to do with the sum of the parts is why I was thinking about it, right? So we're whole beings, right? It's not like our mind and our soul are these like two separate things. Those things are so connected for us. We lost Joylyn. I wish that I have followed more carefully all of those writings, but there is a lot of writing about the need to heal our nous, right? And so we have this like, we're given curiosity as part of like the divine and like the fact that we're made in God's image, right? So we naturally have this curiosity, which is beautiful. I mean, it's not a bad thing that we want to know how things work, right? I mean, we see that in kids all the time, and like God willing, we don't lose that even as adults, right? We continue to be curious about how things work. So it seems to reason that that was not an intended pun, but that we would want that in our lives, right? That we would want to understand the orbit of the planets or the orbits inside atoms or all of those things, because there's so much beauty in it. I know that's the topic for another group, but but they have to all be connected, right? But I really did love that little section talks about that, and yeah, how the ways that we take in knowledge, right, are a part of a whole for us, right? So if the nous is the eye of the soul, it's how we're taking things in to our beings, right? And we are whole. We missed you.
Shut down the whole operation. Our electricity just like shut off for a second.
Go ahead.
I just rambled while we waited. Sorry.
Carrying on, friends.
You did a good job, Erin. And you made me think of something because you said something about our kids wanting to know things and that's natural and beautiful. And I was just thinking, because there's another passage right above where I was reading the one about intellectus and ratio on page 141 in the book. It says, faith needs reason to illuminate and unfold its own content, and reason needs faith to teach it things that it cannot know by its own powers. And it seems like almost there's a give and take, or I want to almost say like checks and balances. Like maybe you hear a bunch of facts. That doesn't necessarily mean that's a truth. And so maybe faith can kind of inform us to look at that whole picture, or at least sort of test out the reason, so that the faith and reason do a balancing act and kind of check and balance each other.
There's a great little book called Reason Within the Bounds of Religion I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's by an author named Nicholas Wolterstorff. He's philosopher, a Christian philosopher. He's a also with Alvin Plantinga, you may have heard of him, but anyway, Reason Within the Bounds of Religion, and it's basically like exactly what you pointed out, this complementary state that they're in. And if ultimately there is some kind of conflict, then we as believers, we default to our faith until the two are reconciled in some way. You know, reason operates within the bounds of religion. But he admits the complication there too, because, you know, for a good long while, the church, you know, was pretty emphatic about a geocentric versus heliocentric conception of the universe, which this book did a good job of kind of explaining why too, or at least alluding to why that would have been more unsettling than just, oh, big deal, it's the sun, not the earth, that's the center. Well, there was a whole elaborate theological understanding that went along with that. So
we so often think of, or at least we talk about, you know, religion versus science and faith versus reason, when really they correspond well. Like our faith is not apart from reason. Like our ability to reason can support our faith, and our understanding of science fits into our faith. Like we're in the places where that doesn't work, it's our own lack. It's not, it's the whole like let God be true and every man a liar. Like it's not that we can figure something out that, oh, like God didn't think of it. It may just be a flaw in our own understanding. And so it isn't that they're opposites, it's that they work together and we just haven't figured it all out yet.
I keep thinking about Aristotle. I was reading his book on rhetoric, where he talks about those three things being part of humans: reason, the logic part, and the beauty and truth. And you must have all three of those. You can't be human without that. You can't just again, in the art of argument, you can't just win an argument by logic, but you also cannot just win it with emotion. You have to balance all of these things. And yeah, so it's more than just we're trying to bring them back together again. No, if we are human, they need to be balanced within us. Otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's where, in our modern time, all the separation started to happen, where all the subjects in any given school think that they have absolutely nothing to do with each other, which is not true at all. It's all one.
So I'm going to do a little broadcast to let everybody know. We'll come back together in 2 or 3 minutes, and then when we come back together, we're going to have people just speak out based on what their kind of takeaways from their breakout room. So y'all figure out amongst yourself who wants to be the spokesperson for this breakout room. I mean, we're a small group, so probably more people can speak than anybody, but just think about it if you're willing. Okay. I'm going to do a little broadcast here.
Okay, I vote for Erin. She's really good at talking.
I was thinking that too.
Oh dear.
Like
I was gonna say no. Okay, if I'm gonna do it, you gotta tell me what I should say. I'm gonna put it back on you. Well, what are some key ideas that we'd like to, I guess, bring out? Genuinely, I'm sort of joking, but I'm also serious.
Oh, we have a new guest. Let me broadcast real fast,
Sure,
and then
go
we'll
ahead.
go out. Okay. Oh, good. Never mind. I don't even have to speak out. Maybe this is something. I'm just going to send it in a text. So carry on.
Okay. Although the God voice is pretty fun.
Funny.
So I think, okay, I'm gonna kind of,
So maybe key ideas is the separation of science and religion is not really separation, but we need each other. We need faith and we need logic.
Yeah, it's a false dichotomy.
Yeah, that the quote that somebody brought out from page 141, somebody highlighted that quote: faith needs reason to illuminate and unfold its own content. Reason needs faith to teach it things it cannot know by its own powers. Somebody else brought that out, but I think that's the key idea for all this.
okay.
And you see that in so many areas too. I was talking with my teenage son about abortion over the weekend. He brought it up, and just talking about the pro-life arguments based on certain texts of scriptures and how some people talk about those in different understandings. But just to say that is part of the necessary argumentation that we need as believers. There's also the definition of what life is. The Bible doesn't in and of itself have just a scientific definition of this is life, or here's a chart on when life begins or whatever, but that you do have reason and science that does provide crucial pieces of that argument to say, you shall not murder. Okay, does that apply? And with the philosophical arguments for size, location, level of dependency, that those can't define when life begins. Those reasonable explorations of the topic are necessary to understand when the scriptures apply. And then on the other hand, to not just look at the individual Bible verses, but to put those together reasonably into a kind of a systematic theology and say, if the pro-abortion argument were true, what would that say in terms of the incarnation? Like the hypostatic union, you couldn't say Mary is the mother of God from the time that Jesus is in the womb if he is not hypostatically united within the womb, but you do have that belief. Anyway, so there's a lot of discussion that took place there, but I think it does show an illustration of that quote: "A faith needs reason to illuminate and unfold its own content." That reason provides definitions for some of those things that our faith tells us.
Yeah, there's so much, I think, importance when we're thinking through these kinds of issues of reason to also bring to know the character of God, right? Who is God? I recall a story from one of my godsons. He was quite young. He was like 4 or 5. He saw that classic Darwin image of, I don't know, some sort of monkey like progressing to man, right? And I mean, there's big, interesting questions to discuss and all that. So I mean, anyway, but he was little, and he asked his mother, "Well, what is this? Is this how it happened?" And she said, "Well, what do you think?" Like, I mean, he was just looking at the image, right? He wasn't like, and he looked at it a while, and he said, "Sure, I think that's how God would do it." And which is so interesting, because her comment to me afterwards was like, I just, regardless of what all the details with that are, the fact that he thought to bring the character of God into the discussion was so rich and beautiful, right? So it wasn't just like the details of it, but it was like, how does that relate to who I know God to be? And I have thought so much about that, just like that being our approach to lots of questions. Let's not forget who God is, so.
Aaron, that's great. It reminds me of those Latin words, the ratio and intellectus. You're that little boy just contemplated that photo, and truth was presented to him that this is not right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think God, I mean, he's 25 years old now. I mean, he's certainly been through some various stages in that conversation, but even just that very innocent approach to like, well, I need to think about who God is, Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that I dropped off and missed Andrew's comment about his child, but thank y'all for carrying on, and we're going to be rejoined by the others from the breakout rooms right now. Oh.
We
Welcome back.
we left on a cliffhanger. That was so uncool. It was a major cliffhanger. A major cliffhanger.
Do you want to finish it up and thereby leave the rest of us in suspense at what led up to it?
So we of course our room was, and I'll let Father Nate talk, but our room was enchantment and education, right? And so the very last thing Father Nate said was, we have to have kenosis to have theosis. We have to have an emptying out of ourselves to have a transformation of ourselves towards God. And Kara's like, wait a minute. So what does that mean? So, and then we got zapped in here.
So now, Father Nate, you're on stage. What does that mean? Tell us all. Bring the light to all of us.
So, at least what I intended. Whether we get to the depth of the truth of the matter is a different discussion. The text I'm thinking of is, have this mind among yourselves, which is in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not call it a God thing to be grasped, but gave it up. He gave up all the glory that he was due to die a death that we deserve, right? That's the basic gospel truth. Well, when we are modeling for our students what it means to be enchanted by the world, we give up our time and our attention and all the other things around us that push and pull at our time. And in doing that, we actually find that we're walking the way of Jesus, who at the end of that text is glorified high above every name. We are in Christ. We're not glorified in the exact same way, but we enter into that relationship. We enter into that in the mystery of the Trinity by, in a little way, in our classrooms, giving up of our time and our personal objectives by being present with the student. And hopefully by doing that, we invite them into the glory that is like seeing God in whatever the thing is that we're doing.
So beautiful. And actually such a great link to what was happening in our discussion, because we were saying how there's this line about the truth presenting itself to us, that sometimes we think that we've got to go and seize or lay hold, but the truth is personal and presents itself to us if we just open ourselves to it. And that's more of a passive stance, or the emptying stance, or the way of giving up oneself. And to honor this truth, we're going to do the reversal, since room 3 or group 3 was group 3. Now you're going to be 1, because Father Nate already started you all out. So was he your spokesperson? Or we'd love to hear a little bit of feedback from your group about the brilliance that was discussed in there.
Father Nate was our official historian, but of course, Vixie and Kara, feel free to chime in. I would like to add to what Father Nate said, which is, okay, so we get to that point, and then the more we bind ourselves with God, the freer we actually become, because we don't have to explain everything, right? That I know, Nate, I know, Father, see, we don't have to explain everything, because that wonder is his, and we're just the squirrel in the tree enjoying it all. So that's my addition to Father Nate. Kara, Vixie, anything you two wanted to add?
No, I think they said it all very well. There's nothing I can add.
What were we trying to do here? I'm sorry. Were we trying to
Give highlights of what we
give
discussed.
highlights.
Yes.
The highlights were talking about like what enchantment was. We were talking about how was loving what was beautiful and encouraging that in the students by modeling it, by guiding them to the true, the good, and the beautiful. And that guides us to God and closer relationship with Him.
Yeah, and one of the things that Kara and Vixie both really reinforced is that it has to be done through modeling, and not just modeling, but through a authentic relationship, right? This authentic relationship with students that, we do feel awestruck and we model that for them, but it's authentic. It's real, We shared stories right before we started, and Kara was talking about the excitement that happened on the airplane ride from Ohio to Alabama. And boy, our minds were racing. Like, what could it be? Did someone have a baby? Someone, get, sick on the plane? What happened? But again, this authentic nature, and Father Nate lifted that up most definitely by saying, we just have to love to be together. The liturgy is about us being together. And that, is important for enchantment, which we say also is joy and wonder. That's it. Oh, where did Dr. Blake go?
Her power keeps going out. She comes back. So this will be
She keeps leaving. She'll be back in a minute.
Well, where are we at? Well, I kid you not. It's the heat level, the heat index in Texas is actually like making electrical panels and stuff short circuit. So that's what's happening right now. I'm sorry that I keep dropping in and out. So did we hear yet from group 2 on reflections? Okay, Allison, Haley, in your group, who's up?
So we had a really great group of, this is the Truth and Beauty group. And so we talked a lot about symbolism of number and the mathematical side of things, but we found that to be a challenge because we had lots of language people in our group, which was beautiful, absolutely wonderful. So we came across a couple of challenges that we would encourage you to ponder with us related to Truth and Beauty about how to do this in the lower school. When there's less depth to the content, what does that look like? And is that different than in the upper school? So we sort of started that conversation, and we agreed that we would all kind of keep thinking on that. We talked about habits of attentiveness and developing just a taste and a love for things that are beautiful at that age, so that as the content grows, then their aspirations will follow and they'll grow into that and mature in their loves and the good things that we continue to give them. We also talked about symbolism, thinking about how these deeper truths are often evident in the content that we study. And Romans 1:20 is the verse that kind of was coming to my mind as we were speaking. And it's for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they're without excuse. And so this book focused primarily on number, but what if you were to extend that to letters or art or character types in literature? And so taking the maybe harder chapters related to number from the book and extending those to a broader context of ways we can think about symbols and their deeper meaning and more of that poetic form can help us bridge the truth and beauty across content areas, and it's even in the younger ages when perhaps that's even more challenging.
Does anybody have anything that came to mind when you think about activating young minds in their appreciation of beauty or their sense of beauty?
I'm interested that it seems harder because to me it seems easier.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know, but that might just be, I might be more like a little kid myself.
So tell me more, Erin, what you're thinking about, like an example, what comes to mind?
So I teach level 1, liberal arts level 1 for St. Raphael. I just every minute with them is like them fascinated with the beauty of something. That's my experience of it. So simple things, right? I mean, even just we start out reading a prayer, and their prayers, we always read a little text from the screen, and it's usually like a line, right? 7 words. And I mean, they will like shout it out. I mean, everybody has to do it. They're like enjoying it so much that I have to let every child say the prayer, and then if I put an image on the screen, a lot of times our picture books, I will actually get them like in a Kindle format and share them on the screen. I mean, I can't make it to the next page because someone's excited about something they saw in the illustration. And I mean, we do make it to the next page, but you know what I mean? Like I just see wonder in them at every single moment. We always do a scavenger hunt because they have to get up and move their bodies. So I send them to find something blue in their house. And they always come back excited because they found a blue marker, and then, I mean, I do that. And then I also have some high school students, and sometimes those classes are back to back, and I get into the high school class and I'm like, please show some appreciation for what's happening. So to me, I just noticed the younger ones delighting in every little tiny thing. But again, might have to do with my own personality. I might not be inspiring those high schoolers enough. So,
well, and that's why we need someone help me with the quote, but about fairy stories, like fairy tales, like they write about rivers that run with wine to remind us that it's so awe-inspiring that they run with water. Was it Tolkien? Chesterton? I don't remember.
Something that I've noticed with younger school is that the wonder is easy. I know, like, there's a video that I show my students every year that shows like the family tree of languages and shows where Latin fits into it. And I show it every year because it's like 4 minutes. And at the end of it, all of the like 9-year-olds' jaws are on the floor and they're just like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, right? So wonder is easy. Sometimes connecting wonder back to truth, I think, is where it gets difficult with younger school. Because I've never once had a student read, Marcus et Julia sunt amici and be like, wow, the incarnation makes sense, So sometimes getting back to some of those like deeper truths that we hope that our students come away with at the younger level is trickier. But yeah, definitely eliciting that sense of wonder with them. I think that's the best part of teaching the little ones, is how naturally that comes and just the ease of it. They're amazed by everything in the world. And it's really easy, I think, to steward that and to help to shape that sense of wonder and awe. And maybe we just hope that as they then go along in their studies, some of the connections to what they're reading and studying to some of those deeper fundamental truths about the world begin to come out and be bolder in their focus.
I love that so much because it reminds me of a couple of things. I think, thank you, Kat, so much for bringing up that quote, whoever it's from, Tolkien, Chesterton, one of those that, like, classical educators throw a dart at one of those and you're likely right. But Lewis was saying, like, with the adults or grownups, you have to say what was behind the door to captivate. But like with children, all you have to say is, there was a door. That in and of itself, they're captivated. And another thing that I remember Lewis corresponding with someone, a concerned mother, it was a mother of a child who said that they loved Aslan more than Jesus. And Lewis's response was, I wouldn't worry yourself too much. The thing that your child is loving and responding to in Aslan is the truth they will come to know in Christ, that it's like a little stepping stone, a gateway for, so it's okay if that Latin phrase doesn't instantly illuminate the mysteries of the incarnation. It's like, prepping them and leading them on a path. It's beautiful. Anybody else thoughts on beauty, truth, and even numbers? I was fascinated with zero as a controversial placeholder. That like something about, oh, the scandal of the zero. I was like, I had never thought about these things, but it was fascinating to think about. Okay, well, let's go to group one. And I think, Dr. Ann, were you going to talk for us a little bit?
I was, but my group, please feel free to interrupt me because now I've already said something. I don't like to overtalk. We did have a lovely conversation, and I think we started out by almost everyone saying, so our general topic was faith versus reason. And many people said, this is challenging to me because I'm not sure it has to be a competition. And so we did kind of pull out one quote that kind of was central to where we ended up in terms of application. So I'm going to read that. It's from like the last section of the book, and I actually have a Kindle version of this book personally, so I can't remember the page, but it's under the section called Two Wings, at that very last conclusion section. But I'll read the quote. Faith needs reason to illuminate and unfold its own content. Reason needs faith to teach it things it cannot know by its own powers, as well as things it may have forgotten. So we had some really lovely conversations about that, a few stories people told from discussions with their own kids or with students about kind of the usefulness of bringing who God is and what we know faith to be into discussions, but at the same time really honoring the fact that God gave us reason, right? And gave us curiosity and gave us the ability to wonder and to think, and that we then are whole. We're not like separate parts. That same section that I was just quoting from also has a little discussion of that. We have but Rashu, so we had a little bit of discussion about that as well. And it was lovely for me. I said I chose that group because I thought it was the hardest discussion for me, but it ended up being beautiful. So anyone else can kind of jump in if someone wants to suggest something else I've forgotten.
Something that came up in our group on that, because of course the enchantment, was that for us it's not either or as well, right? Because as finite science has gotten, they have still, even more so, they're more robust in not knowing who God is, right? Only what he has revealed to us through nature, his revelations. And so the two actually, for us, when we were talking about enchantment, have to go together. So we fell along the same terms as you all.
And I think that illuminates what you were saying, Amanda, right? I mean, I think sometimes like sometimes faith comes naturally and we have to see how faith leads to reason. And sometimes reason comes naturally, but we can help guide how it also leads us to faith, right? So sometimes I think one example that came up was like, okay, the orbits of the planets, right? I mean, that's kind of a scientific thing, but we can also, that can lead us to this awe in who a God that could make something that does that. I think about that all the time, the universe. Lord have mercy, that's just unbelievable that was made in that way, you know. So
our nervous system,
yes, and then on the same level, like atoms, the way atoms work, or ours. I mean, it's just astonishing. So
we talked about making space for students that are sort of naturally inclined to this poetic way of thinking, and then those that maybe aren't. And so we talked about different disciplines. You know, students are going to come into your class with more apprehension or fear, kind of based on the discipline you teach and based on, you know, their background and ways of thinking, and making sure that we make space in our room for those that are eager to think in this way, but also students that are maybe not finding the value in the moment. And then us keeping the long vision of this is a formative way of thinking, and we're coaching and guiding you in this way because we know that it's good for you and good for human flourishing in the end. And so being intentional about that space and making room for diverse students and their ways of thinking in our classrooms. And as we were talking about beauty, it came up about, well, what about a special needs student? What if we had a blind student in the class? How would they perceive beauty, and how would they articulate, beauty in that way? And think about the perspective that they would bring and the richness and depth that we've missed that they would bring to our class. And so likewise, having students with different propensities and giving them time and space to speak to these things and drawing them out in the conversation. On page 142, just a page over from where Aaron was kind of quoting, I really liked his quote. He says, we must understand that faith is not blind. It is a light that enables us to see the natural world more clearly. And so I think all of these things, this enchantment, the truth and beauty, the faith and reason, they're all aimed with the telos of helping us see creation and our creator more clearly through the conversations and the things that we study.
I'd like to share my wow moment with that. So Aaron was talking about the astronomy and the orbits of the planets, and so we know that there's elliptical orbits and the planets spin around the sun. But my wow moment, so that's the reason, right? We can calculate it, we can figure that out. But I don't know if you can remember this illustration. That's my wow. So then you see the dance between Earth and Venus, and it becomes this pattern. That's the faith and the wow for me.
I'm with you. Those pages, those margins were where I was like, what? No way. I was just astonished.
Well, just after the quote that Allison read, it says the answer isn't faith or reason, it's love. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, Christy. Yeah.
My 17-year-old is a lover of math and music theory, which are both things that I don't know super well myself. I love math, but not the way he loves math. And he's really into using these online elaborate graphing calculators to look how you can like shift a graph. And he'll bring me these things like, look at what this looks like so excited. And I'm like, what is that? Well, that's the function, and I'm feeling totally lost. But there's something just beautiful in that he sees that enormous beauty. And even that technology helps us to see that in a way I never could in high school, because we didn't have calculators that did those things. And I wouldn't have done it by hand. But I think all the time about how that's really helped him to engage the beauty of mathematics.
I think that's such a great point to bring up, Aaron, in terms of dealing with students in the modern age and technology and things like that. Because on one hand, as classical educators, we want to establish a sort of preserve, like a nature preserve, where it's like a protected space where things can be really nurtured and saved, preserved. But at the same time, we want to not be just anti anything that is more contemporary, because, there were contemporaries to Galileo. There were contemporaries to Plato, that everything, time is all relative, and relative to eternity, wherever we are on this timeline is kind of comical to an eternal God. So there are things even today that are emerging as beautiful and captivating. And should the timeline carry on, there may be things that people look back on as like, wow, do you remember when this emerged or this presented itself? So I would just encourage us all to be on the lookout for that as well in what our students bring, because in our old crusty selves, we can be a little bit snobby sometimes, but they may be finding new beauties that will enhance us all. Ash, what do you want to add?
I had a question for those in group 3, education and enchantment, and wondering if you guys got to the second bullet point of liturgy as a structural principle, because we have in our handbook and in the parents' handbook this description of us doing liturgical learning, and there's a fairly brief description of what that could look like in our handbooks, and how we use that to structure our class period. And I'm just curious what people are doing with that. Like, I just read, but earlier in the year, I read Josh Gibbs' book, Something They Will Never Forget, or something like that, where he talks about his use of creating a classroom catechism, which at first felt like the most overwhelming thing in the entire world. And I'm like, great. I don't know where you found the time in the day, being a full-time teacher, full-time parent, husband, etc., to do that. But I'm still, I'm still tinkering with, how that could be something that I still kind of draw from a little bit. So I'm curious what the rest of you do, to, even if it's just, speaking to what you do as students enter your classroom, and then how you then dismiss your classroom. Because I know that in both my logic classes and in my writing and rhetoric classes, I've always got some kind of music playing, but then I have some sort of a prompt up, either a quote that I want them to think about that then we'll talk about for the beginning of class, or a question, or in my writing classes, I'll put up a painting that has some kind of story going on and have them create the story or whatever. But I'm just interested in other ways that this idea of the classroom as being a liturgy, from the start to the end, how you guys have worked with that, and just some thoughts if anyone wants to share.
We actually did get to it. And Kara, I'll let you talk into that, about the liturgy. I think in the end, for us, it was like on a 2 level, kind of like the inner group of Christ and the outer group, right? He used parables for those outside of his discipleship, because they didn't quite get everything, so he had to use parables. So it's almost like on 2 different levels, the liturgy as a functionality, but then within the liturgy, how do you then cause that joy, that wonder that eventually leads to wisdom? And for as long as I've taught, even if it's a small snippet, because you mentioned Josh Gibbs and the catechetical portion, even if it's something so small, it just engages the student, whether it's a virtue or a saint, for our Orthodox tradition, or something from the Bible that correlates. What I found, and I can't help but do this, and like you said, well, when do you find the time? Is it's powerful when it comes from the students themselves. It's powerful when, through that relationship that, our group talked about, we get to know our students so much that we'll know, based upon their reflections, their discussions, where we need to kind of pull that wonder and pull that information for them to be in awe. Doesn't always happen. But, I think for me, that's how I start too, like you, Ash. Just something short, quick, of catechism, and then something for them to think about, or I have them do interactive student notebooks, a little bit more than what a commonplace book is. Rather, it's something that they actually do a bit more during that 7 minutes. So basically, I take 7 minutes at the top of the hour for that, and I do time it. It's 7 minutes because I stick to the liturgy. And then at the very end, having that, so, what was it that was interesting, or what came out from what we discussed between this, that, and the other? And just having that time to just sit with it, even if it's in silence, just sit with it. I know silence is uncomfortable, but that's kind of like what I do. But Kara actually spoke into that, so I'll pass the mic over to Kara.
I started by speaking a question, Ash, very similar, because Caldecott kept like saying, well, liturgy leads beauty, but he didn't explain it. I was like, okay, but how is this connection? How is it connecting? But then when he talked about the architecture and the stained glass windows, then it made more sense to me, because growing up in church, there was a stained glass window like right behind the pulpit, and it was a picture of ascending Christ and that on a cross. There was a cross, and then in the middle there was this circular stained glass window of him ascending. And it always refocused me, because it's right smack in the middle of the sanctuary and you can see it. And always, capture my imagination is what else was happening when he was ascending and then coming back and returning and all those things. And it grew, it fascinated me, and all the stories that are told in that and those stained glass windows, and which probably shapes a little of how I include it. For me, liturgy is more of structure of lessons, the rhythm and order in which I do things. I start actually because the classes I teach are writing rhetoric 1 and 2 and Waldorf language 2. The students are younger. So I start with letting us all talk to each other as they come in, and getting all the excitement out, and then focusing us with a prayer, and then jumping into whatever the subject is. On the first day we introduced it. The second day for writing rhetoric is our Bible day. And so we'll do a story, or for level 1, a verse for level 2 on a theme that's similar to the other. And every week it's the same rhythm, more or less. So they know what they're expecting. They know what's going to happen every time. What exactly we'll do is different, but the rhythm is the same. And at the end of all the lessons, we have a benediction, refocusing us and blessing them and on the rest of the week. And I don't do the student reflection just because I've had students who are not Christians as my classes, and I didn't want to make it awkward for them. And we had good talks with those families, with those parents. Because I was telling them we are doing Bible stories, we are doing verses. That's happening in class, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's fine, that's fine." I'm like, "Okay." But I didn't want them the students to feel on the spot to have a prayer, to make a prayer, to have a reflection on something that they might not share, but they still get the benefit of hearing the truth, of seeing that beauty. Oh yeah, in the Bible day, I have a picture illustrating, hopefully, either the story or illustrating, or that goes along the theme of the verses that are more proverbial. So trying to draw attention to the beauty, kind of like the stained glass windows did.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel sometimes in the ways that we structure our classes, and the beginning is in the end, it's a little bit of a giving of ourselves. Like that's one of the places that's like, oh, this is really like how Father Nate is. So at least this last year, and I might change this moving forward, but we would always have an extended moment of silence, because I need that as a human to center myself. We would always stretch, and like I would have the students like literally stand up. And I taught writing and rhetoric 4 and other like middle school age classes, but I'm in my 30s and I still need to stretch and get up and like wiggle. So it's just who I am. And then there was a prayer that would center us before we moved on. So it was a way for me to like let them know me, especially early on, and then it becomes something that's like that outer versus inner thing that Presbyteria was talking about. Like, okay, I know that when I get to class, Mr. Dickinson is going to make me stay quiet kindly for 45 seconds to 3 minutes, depending on his need. Yeah, and it's just that's what I do, and it's served us well. But I would feel freedom to like express your like who you are, like give of yourself to the students and what you feel comfortable doing.
I feel like I need to share something here. Even though I'm new to School A, I've been teaching at a classical Christian school for 8 years now. And just this past year, we did put more of an emphasis on having a liturgy. And the kids really loved knowing what was going to happen. Gives them security. And just one little story. There was one time when I got stuck in between classes talking to the principal, and I was like 5 minutes late to my class. And as I'm walking, this is a 7th graders, the kids that don't want to do it. I was going to teach them Latin. So I walk into the classroom and they're there going through the catechism. And I'm like, this is absolutely beautiful. They love doing it. They wanted that security. I came in late, but they were ready to go. So it's a beautiful thing. Literacy does lead to beauty.
And on that note, friends, we've gone a little bit longer than we anticipated, but my first book discussion with School A, and the only disappointing thing has been my internet connection. Otherwise, y'all, this has been a beautiful time together, and I'm so grateful for all of your active participation. And I really look forward to further great exchanges. I feel like what a great gift that God has provided us with one another and with his body, that we're able to fellowship in this way and exchange ideas in this way. So keep all the great ideas coming, and feel free. A way to interact with one another on Canvas coming soon. So stay tuned, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. Presbytera and Allison, thank you for moderating. And then thank you to all of you. And Aaron, thank you for stepping in and, being my tag in the ring when I kept falling off. So thank you all so much. And I'm here if you need me. Let's stay in touch. And I look forward to the semester that we'll get to enjoy together. Good night, everybody.